you show phase 2 of the bad things that are going to happen to Bitcoin based on centralization, and you say that in the second layer there will be a consolidation of regulation that kind of takes apart Bitcoin limb from limb, right? What is stopping us from going back to layer 1 in that scenario? In other words, in the negative case where that happens, what's stopping us just falling back to layer 1?
That's a very good question, and I believe that this is the long game, right? These companies like National Exchange backed, all the Wall Street players that invest in Blockstream, all these people, they're smart. They're actually playing a long game, which is, a lot of people say that all these money people are short-term thinkers, but no, these people know what they're doing, and it's going to take a while for us to acclimatize to these second-tier networks. And at the point where we have an infrastructure that's built on the second tier, there's no going back, right? There's no infrastructure left back on that stuff. We all know that if anybody's a software developer, you know that software degrades over time. Like, it's a phenomenon that you don't just have a piece of software and then 5 years later you can just spin it back up and start using it. It doesn't work like that, right? So when we get over to the second tier network, we're there and we're not moving back. Even if you wanted to move back, you couldn't, because all that is locked down by these Lightning Network liquidity partners that are paying outrageous fees to on that net, right? And they're gladly paying those fees because they're making even more fees from the millions of their customers, right? So, so there's no moving back because of those two issues.
Oh, okay. Question for you. All right. Here we go. 2 people and 2 microphones. We're ratcheting it up to layer 2. So, what's the right way to scale Bitcoin?
Well, that's another thing that my friend Mike and I have talked about. My problem is that it exists at the exclusion of everything else in Bitcoin. And I really respect John, and he said something that I whose team am I on? Am I in like negative Bitcoin? No, I'm on team Bitcoin. As an extension, I'm on team cryptocurrency. And when I'm seeing these things happen, it pains me, right? So I think that the fact that we can only scale on layer 2 as a decision is a travesty. We should be experimenting with lots of different scaling techniques, including raising the block size as a very canonical way, but also, these second-tier networks should also be available in case you want to use them. I'm saying that in the marketplace of ideas, we've, by these small set of people, they decided that we're only doing this. So it's a shame.
Raise your hand if we're talking over your head. You don't understand what we're talking about when we say first and second layer. Okay.
Don't be embarrassed.
So yeah, don't be embarrassed. Just some terminology. So when software engineers think about cryptocurrency, they think about it in terms of network layers. So Bitcoin is not just a type of funny internet money, right? It's protocol, and protocols are built in layers. And so if you've been in software development or in the software industry for a long time, it's kind of ubiquitous and know what we're talking about. But we should probably code of Bitcoin itself to make it scale. When we say second layer, we're talking about leave that Bitcoin code alone and put another layer on top of it that helps it scale. So I saw some blank stares.
Okay, yeah, if you have any, we're going to open it up to floor. Yeah, I do. I did put something in my Medium article, and you did a great job with your Medium article, by the way. It was a lot shorter than mine, by the way. So if you want a quick read, go to his. I put in my Medium article that I'm very concerned that we're going to have the same conditions happen with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency that we had with gold and the U.S. dollar, for example, right? So, what happened with the U.S. dollar is that it was essentially in its current form invented in 1913, and it was backed by physical gold, right? It was a receipt for gold that you could, at some point, you could turn it into the bank and they would give you specie, right? They would give you a chunk of gold, or maybe in a coin form or something. So my question to you, John, is like, am I thinking about that correctly, or why are we not on the same path with the Lightning Network that we were on with gold and the US dollar?
I mean, you're on the right path with the exception of one gold. One property of gold is you have to physically hold it. And it's not, you can't obscure the fact that you own it from the government. So the first layer of Bitcoin itself is censorship resistant. I mean, on the dark web right now is the Daily Stormer, which is a website that's literally racist and bigoted and anti-Semitic in every possible way. And it was deplatformed from all of the banking system, but it lives on perfectly fine today with Bitcoin donations. I bring it up just as evidence that first layer of Bitcoin is completely uncensorable. I'm making no claim that the light work is uncensorable. I'm saying that it is a way to do commerce, specifically the two use cases I mentioned, without so one of the things we didn't bring up was Andreas Antonopoulos. Raise your hand if you've seen a video from Andreas Antonopoulos about Bitcoin. A pretty prolific figure on Bitcoin. He has this concept of protocol ossification, or it basically says that over time, the software will become unchangeable. And the analogy is the TCP/IP, or the IP internet stack, right? Where the internet protocol itself, it kind of was moving along and add features to the protocol. And a protocol is simply rules that anyone who does an implementation in software has to follow to basically play the same game and participate in the same network. Version 1, IPv1 came out, point releases came out, IPv2 came out, point releases came out. By the time we got to IPv4, which is over 20 years ago, changes weren't really possible anymore. The routing moved to hardware routing, Cisco routers. There was appliance hardware that was reliant on the standard that was in IPv4, and the internet exploded so much that you really couldn't force people off of that standard without retiring billions worth of hardware. And so Andreas Antonopoulos' theory is that Bitcoin is a protocol, and as a result, it will have a protocol stack. And each layer will ossify. In other words, it'll get to the point where no one can change it anymore. And he thinks that's happening faster than a lot of guys that are on the other side of this argument believe. So that's a very long-winded answer, but I think back to your question, gold is confiscatable by men with guns. A brain wallet is not. That's my big argument against it having an equivalent.
But were you getting more? You're contrasting Bitcoin with the light and the dollar and gold.
Correct.
So where the dollar, which we know today, is going to take us to the Lightning Network, and so you're worried about the door closing.
Yes.
On the link between like settling the chain or something.
Right. So I'm looking at the. I do respect that argument, and I have Chris's talk on that very issue, and it does make a lot of sense. However, the analogy, back to the SAT kind of thing when you're in high school, the Lightning Network is to Bitcoin as P is to IP is completely orthogonal. It's not reality. The dollar to gold as to Bitcoin is to Lightning Network is more along the lines that I'm thinking, because talking about value, exchange of value. Now, if you were in the context of IP, that has no, you're not trading any value on that. There's no restriction of that protocol to anybody. You can copy, it's just you can copy that around and build even today with that. It's not preventing you from doing that, but it's not the same thing as Bitcoin, where you simply cannot transact on the Bitcoin network, provided that there's enough already on there. It drives the fees so high that the average person has no chance of transacting on that network. They're forced to use an altcoin or a second network. That's so. On the IP layer, there's no such restriction. So that's how I look at that completely differently.
So,
No, I didn't know.
do you want to take questions from the audience?
Q&A. Is this going to get reverb?
Test. So,
Don't do that.
you messed up, John.
It's teetering on the edge there.
Oh my God, John, that was not strapped in. That's like a reckless Lightning Network node right there. All right, so first off,
Delay on that.
the gold and Lightning Network analogy sounds like great discussion over beers. I think that's a little bit misguided. Like in terms, not like I think those analogies really map up too easily, but. To me, it seems like you're not necessarily, you don't necessarily hate Lightning Network. You like the technology and stuff like this. And this discussion, I wouldn't really call it a debate. This pasture sun brunch discussion of technology is really about. I think it really comes to block size, because it sounds like you don't dislike innovation with technology and potentially micropayments and stuff like that. It's more like, being forced to do this because of block size. I think that's really what this comes down to. And I think what the real discussion here is the decentralization with big blocks versus smaller blocks, and everyone gets to run their own node. And I was hoping maybe you could, because to me that's where the core of this conversation is really, does everyone need to run a node, yes or no? And then discuss that, because really the goal of doing these second layer things is everyone can run a node, and is that important? And some people say yes, and some people say no. And Dash Jr., who very well respected, I'm not saying I respect him, I'm not saying he isn't great, I'm just saying he's very respected in the space, and a lot of times people think he's technically right. He thinks the block size should actually be smaller.
Right.
Okay, so because he wants to be very careful with how this thing scales, because I think the thing that people is kind of cliche to the people who like Bitcoin Cash, but you don't need to use Bitcoin, use a credit card, because there's not, unless you have a use case where you have to use this permissionless money, it's not really like too many people. Obviously I don't want to generalize because I don't know, but that would be like the counter argument to that. So I think I would be interested, I'll give it to Randy first, or however you want to run it, but I'd be interested to know, is it important for everyone to run their own node? And if you could discuss that briefly.
Well, I want to address something that you said early up front. This is the lie of the scaling debate. The lie was that there were two sides. That's not true. There were many different angles from this. There were people who wanted to go strictly to layer network, second tiers and beyond, at the exclusion of, keeping ossification, There were people who wanted to raise the block size only. But my take is that let all have their day in court with the court of the market. That means that and that's why it's such a shame here, because there were so many good ideas that never got any press, and they were summarily dismissed, and the argument just became raise blocks. That's just a shame. It's not. And so to your question about should everybody be running a node, well, of course not. The people who have a business that they would need to run, like a merchant processor or something like that, then yeah, you need to make sure that you're accounting for all of your transactions through that decentralized mechanism. But that's, the fact that everybody doesn't need to know necessarily. So that's my thing. Now, if your question was, should we have raised the bar? Yes, we should have, definitely. My thing from the early days was that there should be no block size limit, period. Like, why are you just putting arbitrary, even Yoshi himself, or herself, or whoever it is, they even, so there's a lot of engineering decisions that were made that were fairly arbitrary, right? There was no engineering decision. Like, he said, okay, I have to do this because of this. He just made the decision arbitrary. And everybody knew that, and it wasn't a problem. In the early days of Bitcoin, there was no block size limit at all. And it became 768 and then eventually 1 megabyte. So, there we go. Now, if there was a block size limit, would there be a problem with spam? Of course there would be. But, we have these miners that are very sophisticated now and know how to propagate blocks. And we have new technologies that help them do that. That's my take.
Do you have any response to that, John?
Well, like Chris said, there's like a variety of ideas around size increase, not just big blocks or small blocks. But I don't take his absolutist approach of there shouldn't be a block size, because in the industry I work in, where we do event-based scaling for like Apple product release, for example, there's a limit you reach, right? It's not always, you're only as good as your weakest point in a system. And essentially, you cannot arbitrarily raise it to infinity, because you will find out that network transport or some other problem will occur that severely cripples the network, right? So if you create a broadcast storm on the internet because your blocks are so big that they're clogging up the whole backbone of the internet, for example, because everyone's trying to rush into Bitcoin for some black swan event. Let's say the euro crashes, right? Everyone rushes to Bitcoin. There's some good papers out there, some white papers, which I will provide on our Telegram group for research if anyone wants to look into it more deeply, but that somewhere up to 8 megabyte blocks, no problem, right? There's like not really any legitimate disagreement among smart technical people that there will be a problem. But then you get 2 meg blocks or the Bitcoin SV gigabyte blocks. You're now running ungoverned. And if you run an engine ungoverned, you can blow it up, right? And the way that you blow up this engine is by breaking the internet with Bitcoin. If you break the internet with Bitcoin, you're going to find out that there's powers that be in the world that can censor you, even though you're on an uncensorable internet of money.
Right.
So you don't want an unrestricted block size, but it's ridiculous that we haven't gone to a 4 or an 8 megabyte block size.
Yeah, okay, that's a good in the middle of a thing, so.
Yeah, I was going to say the takeaway that I got from, I guess, really both arguments is that in Bitcoin use case, right? Like, it's got a functional goal that it does through technology, right? Which is a transfer of value. And the argument that I got was that it's not necessarily about the technology, the block size, whatever that underpins it. It's about really the game theory and the network effects of what happens to the technology when the network moves away from one layer to the other. And I think that's a very valid and very strong argument. You know, the infrastructure degrades, right? It's not maintained. I don't know what the trade-off is. I think that, you know, kind of as the conversation has gone on, this last piece that you guys are talking about makes a lot more sense. But I think short-sighted just to look at, you know, big blocks or not, right? Like that's, right? Like what's the reason? You know, what's the why? Like why are we doing what we're doing, right? Like it's, the technology is the how to the why, right? And if we don't get the why right, then the how is arbitrary. It's more of a game theory problem than it is, I think, a technology problem.
Yeah, I made that very point in the Medium article. I said if to have a fractional banking system like we have now and all that stuff, then what's the point? Why are we doing this? Like, and if your opinion is, yeah, we want to recreate all that, that's fine. That's your opinion, but I'm not here for that. And I don't think balance of you guys are probably here for that either. So I don't think John is here. I don't know you that well here for that either.
No, not here for that.
So I think to that point, the nature of how Lightning, based on this, the nature of how Lightning is coming to be, like it undermines the very basic of Bitcoin. So if Lightning maybe happened in a different way, you know, where it wasn't controlled by core groups of people, investors, or whatever, then maybe it'd be a different, you know, scenario. But
Yeah, I mean, I guess I back the primary notion that if a second layer you erode or still uses IPv4, that there's billions of internet endpoints on the internet that are using not a first layer, but a layer in that call that literally hasn't changed in 20 years. It's not eroding. It is what it is, but people are focused on voice over IP and video streaming now on the internet because that's where the new users come in, right? They come in on these higher layers. I hate to break it to you, but if you stay with a one-layer solution, you're not going to get wide adoption. And that's just a fact. If you look at any, if you don't bring them the use case that they care at that moment.
A one-layer solution only.
I know, but you are poo-pooing the second layer solution, which...
In the form it is right now, yeah. So Randy does have a point about the way it's being done. However, it would be difficult to do it another way at this point. It's kind of, we missed a little bit on that. We got surprised with Bitcoin because it was the first thing and it was new, and this guy had put all these cool technologies together like a awesome cake, right? So we were all surprised by that, but nothing is going to surprise us further along the line. That's why it's hard to bootstrap a new currency and that sort of thing. So, you know, I don't have a lot of hope that someone can invent a layer 2 that would be marginally different.
I guess what I object to in your argument is that you say all ideas need to be allowed to flourish, except for Lightning.
No, the Lightning Network is fine, but it's you realize that we're dealing with a network that is exclusive only to that, right? The people who decide these things have decided to flush all the great ideas except for that idea down the drain. That's really what happened.
I don't know that that's true because raise your hand if you know.
I know that because I was one of the people making these, and I see the pull request come into Bitcoin Core itself, and you know it's a good, you know, more than 50% are just completely, you know.
That was going to be my main question: why these stuff? Bitcoin is just the first implementation of it. There's been a lot of progress. Why are we stuck on that and trying to make it do what it does already?
Well, that is a good question. His question was why we stuck on Bitcoin when we have
I
presumably
was going to introduce the concept to the group of hard fork versus soft fork because that's
Well,
relevant.
was your question more like, why are we jammed up on Bitcoin and why are we talking about exploring altcoins and stuff, or? Okay. Because I think that,
Okay, I'll rephrase it. Why are we working on layer 2 solutions when we could be working on layer 1?
right, I mean, so the thing is, the Bitcoin, we all would agree, I think, that Bitcoin has a preponderance of users, and users bring liquidity to the network, right? We can argue that, but I think we all agree that, right? Why do people go to Bitcoin? Because it has the most liquidity. Why does it have the most liquidity? Because it has the most users. So we've got a very valuable thing here in Bitcoin, and it's not without merit. But my thing is that a lot of people don't see the wide range of awesome people that are involved with Bitcoin, and just completely have all of their ideas thrown out the window, which actually leads us to some of these altcoins, because you see people like Pt2, you see people like Dash, all these people who tried to interact with Bitcoin in the early days and really shunned and told to go away. So, you have altcoins in part because of that. I'm not saying every altcoin, I'm saying very the popular altcoins had people try to try to interact with Bitcoin and were not.
That being said, I really like your idea of using those people as a way for those layer 1s to interact. So,
Wes, you have a question?
just me,
We have a question here.
Okay, so I'm a little bit confused. Maybe you can clear that for me. So initially you were, why are you smiling? I only started. I haven't told a joke yet.
A troll knows a troll when he sees it.
No, I was going to give you credit. Like, so you're in that decentralization is meant for robustness, like in terms of Gab and things like that. I like an argument. Like, I'm very amiable to that. So you said that as a pro of the Lightning Network. And then you followed up your argument, or maybe it was before, where you said that one of the things that worried you about it was that all these other players coming in that would have access to the user, and you started talking about ICE and BACT. And so why I was confused was, it seems like you're both arguing the same point, that you're worried about centralization coming into Lightning Network, and you're saying that Lightning Network is all about decentralization. So I'm confused. What is it? Like, who actually is going to have?
So Wes, you're speaking you're speaking in absolutes, Wes. So the use case of the decentralized exchange is is an example of Lightning adding decentralization to the Bitcoin ecosystem. But Chris is right. In other ways, it's adding centralization to the Bitcoin ecosystem. So both things are true. That's why it sounds like we're arguing the same position. But remember the original question that this debate was on, and that is Lightning not is Bitcoin a scaling solution? Is Lightning a scaling solution for Bitcoin, or Lightning the savior of Bitcoin, the be-all, end-all? Yeah, but tell me another decentralized exchange that's in any of the entire crypto ecosystem that's working. What? BISC? Yeah. Is it fully decentralized, do you think, as much as Lightning atomic swaps?
How much liquidity can you get through it? Can you get pretty good liquidity through it?
From what I've heard, I haven't actually used BISC, but
would it be with something like BACT or anything like that?
well, I mean, BACT is, as far as I know, just dealing with like Bitcoin, right? They don't.
Right.
Well, but the thing is the question that was posed is there a sufficient decentralized exchange? And yeah, currently there is. It's BISC, BISQ. You can actually trade fiat for Bitcoin on BISC. You actually use You the bank account transfers direct from your bank account to their bank account. You have a third escrow agent, and it's decentralized in that manner. Then you all have that's for fiat transfers because that's how they handle that. But they also do transfers in the same manner with escrows.
It's operating on the apologize rather than ask permission decentralization
Yeah.
of bank accounts. So as the banks realize what's
Well,
happening,
to
they're
be
gonna
fair,
shut that down.
you can't use bank accounts on Lightning Network either. So, but exactly. So for crypto to crypto, it's a multi-sig escrow arrangement.
If it's escrow, you can't really call it decentralized, or it's not fully decentralized if there's an escrow service. The escrow service is
But you can decentralize.
some type of, I mean, my company does that.
Is the Lightning Network supposed to enhance the speed of Bitcoin in the network of Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's really supposed to do all the things that the network was asking for all along the path, right? So we're talking about these microtransactions, the potentially zero comp transactions, where there be no confirmation needed, right? Because you're sending your payment through what I call a liquidity partner, which is a node. So think of it like Google. If Google was a liquidity partner like Lightning Network, you'd be sending payments through them, right? And so a lot of the things that we deal with now on the main factor on the Lightning Network. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I met with Adam Back, who's I think he's still the president of Blockstream, and he talked at length about the block size debate and the Lightning Network. And he was completely anti-Lightning Network, strangely enough, because he had no way for individual Lightning Network liquidity partners to share liquidity. So like say I had a Bitcoin, Big Whale wants to use me for 50 Bitcoin. I couldn't facilitate